Welcome. Hi. Okay. Hello. Jessica could not be here today, so I am welcoming you. I am Donna Jo Napoli. I teach creative writing for children here. And people in the back, there are seats up front if you need a seat. Okay. I'm so happy to be here, so happy to see your beautiful faces. Our visitor today is Brenda Bowen. Brenda has been in children's publishing for quite a while now. She was editorial director at Scholastic Press, Henry Holt Books for Young Readers, Simon & Schuster Children's Publishing, Disney Hyperion, and in 2009 she moved from editorial work to agenting. She now is an agent at Sanford J. Greenburger Associates, which is a large agency that covers many things and has many rather successful writers, including Dan Brown, who
and Kafka.
And Kafka. So dead people too. She has been on the board of directors of the Eric Carle Museum of Picture Book Art and of the Children's Book Council. She's now a member of the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, of the Authors Guild, and of the Association of Authors Representatives. As an agent, she represents clients who write and illustrate picture books, as well as those who write chapter books, middle grade novels, and teen novels. And she has a select group of clients who write for the adult trade market. She sells literary fiction, but also mass market series, electronic books. She represents film rights. And on top of all this, she is herself an award-winning children's writer. And she is represented not by herself, but by someone else in Greenburger Associates. We're very lucky to have Brenda with us today. And you wanted to say a few words before
Yeah, I
we
want to
start?
take your picture for myself. So give me a big smile. A serious smile. Okay. That's good. All right, good. So thank you for having me here.
Yeah.
I'll just start.
Okay.
Okay, so Donna Jo's going to feed me some questions, but I'm very happy to be here. Sanford Greenburger, as Donna Jo said, is an old and established agency. It started in 1932, so it's 81 years old, which is a long time for a literary agency, especially in the States. Oh, go closer or go farther away? Go closer. The agency represents authors of all stripes, from children's book people to genre fiction to literary fiction to popular fiction to nonfiction, etc. Donna Jo, you wanted to start with what an agent does?
Yeah.
What an agent is?
I think
I want to ask you a question.
Okay.
Yeah. So, if you'd like to help me know what to say to you, are there people here who would like to be published? Okay. Are there people here who have been published? Okay. Are there people here who have been published by regular trade book publishing companies? Okay, great. All right. So. We'll start for the people who wish to be published, who are yet to be published. What is an agent? An agent is the advocate of the author who helps secure a publishing house, a publishing contract for an author. So you write a book, you love it, you workshop it, you take it through many, many iterations. It's the best book you can possibly write. It's as good as or better than anything that you've read. And you say, you know what, this could be published, this should be published. the person who is your conduit between you and your laptop and the great market of readers in the world is your agent. And your agent, and we'll talk about how you get an agent later, but your agent reads your manuscript, says, oh my God, it's the best thing I've ever read. It's got to get out there. I'm burning to sell this book. And the agent, whose job it is to know scores, if not hundreds of people in the publishing business, your agent's job is to find the right editor, the right publisher for your work. So your agent sends your work to either one select person, you're going to love this, I know your taste, you can preempt this book, pay a lot of money for it, it's yours, or to 20 people and says, I've got something hot, this is fantastic. I know you're all equally capable of loving and publishing this book. Who's going to make me the best offer? Then somebody does or doesn't. And the agent then, if somebody does make an offer, the agent negotiates your contract and sets you up with the publisher. But that is, to me, about 20% of what an agent does. The rest of it is the whole life of your book. So anytime you have a question, from what do I wear to my school visit, to I hate my jacket, to I hate my editor, to I love my publicist, how do I show affection without making her feel I'm a stalker, all those questions, every day you can go to your agent and ask those questions. Any random thought. Or, hey, I wrote this great line. Do you want to hear it on the phone? Usually your agent doesn't want to hear it on the phone because they'd rather just wait and read your whole book. But they will, because their job is to take care of their authors and artists, if you're an artist. Anybody an illustrator here? One illustrator. Good. So your agent is your advocate, your steady rock of an advocate throughout the life of your book and of your career. So you may publish books at different publishing houses, and there are different casts of characters at each house and different characteristics of each house. But your agent is always going to be the one, like your mom, who says, honey, I've got your back. If that's what you want to do, I'm right behind you. I'm right behind you. The agent will always say, here's what you could do. You could do this thing, or this thing. And whatever you choose is what we'll do. Unless it's career suicide, then the agent probably wouldn't advocate for that. But yeah, that's basically what an agent does. Mm-hmm. And almost all publishers require that you have an agent before you submit to them. So they don't take what is called unsolicited material. They used to, but now in our litigious age where everybody says, hey, I wrote a book about a boy who was mistreated by his parents and went to a boarding school, therefore I can sue J.K. Rowling. There are so many people who say things like that now that publishers only want to see material from people that they ask to see it from, or from agents. I get a lot of reverb on this mic. Are you hearing that too? Can we do something? That might be better. Is that better?
I just want to point out publishers also have in-house rights people that work directly with agents to assist with that. I heard that.
They do.
Connected from
They do.
commissions.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a question to follow up on that. Brenda and I have a long history together. When she was working for in Editorial, she edited a number of my novels, and now, as an agent, I sell my work on my own. However, sometimes I have something that I put in Brenda's hands, and actually, what she's representing me on, she originally put in my hands. She talked to me about writing a book about X, and I took it from there. But in that, to me, she was both an editor and an agent. And I don't know, do you find that you are doing editing work on manuscripts?
Yes.
Yes.
All the time. Donna Jo is unusual in that she's the only one for whom I only do, well, there are only about 3 people for whom I only do a few things. An agent, when you sign up with an agent, the agent represents all your book-related work, unless you have grandfathered in like Donna Jo, grandmothered in. Now I've lost the original question. Do I do editorial work? Yes, tons, yes. So I do editorial work on manuscripts, particularly on manuscripts that are from yet to be published people. So if you've written the greatest book that you could imagine writing, and then it comes to me, and we'll talk a little bit more later about where to send your manuscript when it's totally ready to go. I then read it and I say, wow, this is good, but it could be better, could be better. She overlooked that she's ending it twice. It ends and then it ends again. Or the whole middle part is so murky, I wish we could just cut. So I will say to the author, thank you for sending me your work. I'm really interested in it. Would you revise and resubmit? That's one thing that an agent might do. Or the agent might say, I want to work with you. I can sell your book, but I need you to do one more editorial pass on it before we take it out there. So when you do find yourself looking at agents, you might submit to several of them simultaneously, and one of them might say, oh my God, it's ready to go. Another one might say, this is terrible. And another one might say, if you only would just change this dog to a cat, it's going to be saleable. So that's the kind of editorial work I do. I'm also always on call for editorial work for my authors. In fact, I brought a manuscript down with me right now, someone whose work I love, I represent. It's going great. New manuscript is, I just don't think, as strong as the previous ones. So I'm a little bit worried about breaking that to the author, but better to break it to the author now than have the critics do it. So.
Okay, you mentioned that most publishing houses right now, you are the gatekeeper. Agents are the gatekeeper for writers to get their work published. How do we get the gatekeeper? How do we find, and not just how do we find an agent, how do we find
the right agent?
The agent that knows how to sell what we write?
Right. Well, there are so many analogies you can use. It's like a marriage, it's like dating, it's like going shopping. I always think of going shopping like you're at a store, you see a dress. The dress would be great, but not on you. And so I look for the dresses that are going to look good on me. That's my little analogy. And another agent right behind me could look great in that dress, but not me. So when a manuscript comes in, it could be fantastic. Like I could have seen Twilight, and I would have been like, I don't like this, and and missed out on the house in the south of France. But I would have said I don't like this, and it wouldn't have suited me, and I would have been a bad agent for Twilight because I wouldn't have gone, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever read in my entire life, which is what the agent did because that's how she felt, and that's how the editor felt, and that's why it was read on a plane from New York to California, and when the editor got off the plane, she made an offer. I would not have been that person. But some books I read, I just recently read an unsolicited manuscript that came to me from a new writer. I loved it. I adored it. I sold it at auction in a minute because it was just the perfect book for me. That one I had to actually compete with other agents for. So some books are very right for a number of people, and some books are very specifically right for a certain agent. So you try to find the agent who best matches how you write. How to do that? Later I'm going to put up on the screen how to query me, but I really think a great tool is called Publishers Marketplace. Publishers Marketplace. There's a paywall, so it's $20 for a month. Now you can go in with 20 people when you're ready, each pay $1, and then get out of it. Don't let them renew your credit card. get out of it a month later. But that lists a great number of deals that are made in the publishing world. And those deals are listed by agent, by acquiring editor, by publishing company, by genre, by price even. Some people, our agency doesn't like to put a price tag, even a vague price tag, on what we sell because we feel that's the client's business and not everybody's business. But when you are ready, it's a really good resource because you can say, oh, that sounds like what I do. And this agent consistently sells in my genre. It consistently sells, sci-fi, or consistently sells cookbooks or whatever it is that I'm writing. I think that's the most useful tool. There are some agents who don't list at all. There's some agents like me who used to list, but now I don't as much because I'm not looking for as many new clients. It's a really good way to for an agent to find new clients. Also, as an agent, I use it a lot because I want to see who at a specific publishing company recently bought a book like this and who wants more in that genre. So it's www.publishersmarketplace.com. Costs money. But when if you're serious about it, and if you do it for 1 month, and especially if you share it with people, it's very useful. But big caveat, there's so much more information available than there used to be about everything. Publishing is no exception. You could spend many a fruitless hour looking at all the other people and how many books they've sold and how successful everybody else is and how sucky you are. That could occupy a lot of your time. Don't fall into that. Comparisons are odious. And don't go to Amazon and look at rankings once you are published of where your book is. It's just a lot of wasted energy and time, and I recommend against it. But as a tool to find an agent, that's, I think, the best place. Also, well, of course, acknowledgments in books frequently say, and thanks to my agent, Brenda Bowen. So read a book you like, read a book you would like to be published, like this person's been published, flip to the back at a bookstore and see who is acknowledged in the back of the book. We have questions from the audience. Are we going to do more?
I had one more question, but go ahead.
I wanted to ask you about exclusivity. My understanding is that an agent would like to have an exclusive on something on her first sight, and that's what I've done recently. It's taking a very long time, but when prior to what you're just talking about now, you mentioned sending it out to several agents.
Mm-hmm.
What's your feeling?
Okay, did everyone hear that question? Okay, when you are ready to submit, should you submit exclusively or to a bunch of agents at one time? Sometimes you'll send out a number of queries, and one agent will come back and say, because I want to develop this with you, I'd like to work with you exclusively. Now, you can say, inside you're going, oh my God, thank you. But what you can do is you can write back and say, that sounds great. Shall we say 8 weeks? Shall we say 3 months? Shall we say a year? Whatever. You don't want to alienate, but at the same time, you have your own rights as an author. So, or you could say, is there a time frame that you have for this? And that way, you know that after 3 months, you can go back and say, it's been 3 months, I'm wondering whether you'll send back notes at this time. Or you can say, it's been 3 months, I'd be delighted for you to keep it, but I do need to send it out. In fairness to my own career, I need to send it out to other people.
You, two things came up. You said, look in the publisher's marketplace and see who's been selling the kind of thing that you're writing. Many people do recognize the kind of thing that they're writing, but not all of us do. The third novel that I did was called A Gothic Horror, and I had no idea it was a Gothic horror. I didn't know what a Gothic horror was. How do you learn how to classify.
Well, okay. I don't think you have to classify that closely. Some people are very, especially in young adult fiction or teen fiction, there's a lot of chatter. What kind of book are you doing? But in that publisher's marketplace, it's, for adults, it's, adult literary fiction, women's fiction, cowboy fiction. It's pretty, like if you're doing one of these, you pretty much know it. For kids, it's teen, middle grade. So it's divided by age level for kids, and by genre, broad genre for adults. But if the publisher is the one who's going to say gothic horror, romance is selling right now, so we'll call this baseball book a gothic horror, because there's a gargoyle on the stadium. So that's the publishers. That's what the publishers do.
Okay. And the other thing that you mentioned was a query letter.
Yes.
What do you look for in a query letter? What's a good
people
letter?
kind of workshop their query letters a little too much, I think, in my estimation. A query letter is the letter that you write to an agent or to a publisher, if you're going directly to a publisher, which you mostly wouldn't be, that says, Dear Brenda Bowen, or Dear Ms. Bowen, or whatever, but not Dear Agent, please. Because the last thing the agent wants is to think, even if it's true, the agent doesn't want to think, you've sent this to 29 agents, and I'm just Dear Agent. I want to know that you've done a little homework, and we can talk more about that too. But if I see, Dear Agent, I have just written a fiction novel about boys who drive in cars. The fiction novel, that's it. Novel is fiction. So if I see that in the first line, I stop reading. If I see egregious grammatical errors in the first line, I stop reading. If it doesn't, and here's again the dress thing. Like if you don't see it on the rack and it's a gorgeous dress that someone else sees, it's just because you don't see it that way. So I could get a perfect query letter about it that says, I read your most recent article in the Hornbook magazine, Brenda, and I thought it was genius. So, oh, great, she likes me, is the first thing that, So first of all, they make I saw that you represented this book, and I loved that book. That's always a good way to make an inroad with an agent or a publisher. I, too, write, and here's my book. Let me tell you a little bit about it. A paragraph, Joe was born with one leg, and then goes from there. But a paragraph. And you can do it as a teaser. You don't have to do the whole book. And I would recommend that you write what would serve as flap copy or back cover copy. So the selling copy that when you open a book, you read on the inside front flap. That's the kind of voice that you want to have, because that gives a reader the sense of the book, and also like a little bit of a cliffhanger. Would he survive another fall? That's sort of how you want to leave it. And then something about yourself. I am a student at UPenn. I have written many articles for the local press. I've never written before. I read widely. I believe passionately in my work. If you have no, quote, credentials, so what? So what? Doesn't matter. The important thing is the book good? Do you love the book? And do I think the book can sell? So I have so our lovely AV person, if you would like to put up on the screen, I have a separate email box for submissions. And appearing soon will be what I recommend you do if you want to send things to me. Our website is greenburger.com. You'll search under agents, you'll find me, then you'll find info about me. And you'll find specific information about what I'm looking for and what I'm not looking for when you click the Submit to Brenda button. And that's my query inboxes, querybb@sjga.com. And that's where, so I have a separate inbox just for submissions. And there's a bounce back on that inbox that says, it's more graciously says, if you don't hear from me within 8 weeks, it means that I've missed the boat on your manuscript, or I am sadly behind on my reading and I can't read it within 8 weeks. So if you don't hear from me within 8 weeks at all, sadly, I'm declining your book. Only because I'm not the right agent, not because it's not the right book to be published, okay? What else were we saying about? Oh, that was about exclusivity, yeah.
That was about
Oh,
the
query
query
letters.
letter.
Queries. Oh, right. So I get hundreds of those a week, hundreds of queries and query letters, and it's just such a visceral thing. It's just such a blink, Malcolm Gladwell thing that you look at the title, you look at the way the query's written, and either you think it's going to be someone you could work with or not. It's a very odd thing. That's all I can say.
I'm going to ask Brenda just one more question and then open it up to everyone. As a writer, I work a lot with other writers, and I often see stories that I love by people, but the real story, the real writing, doesn't begin till like chapter 4 or so.
Yeah.
They got all this early stuff. When you're looking at a manuscript, do you ask for the whole manuscript or just part? And if you ask for just part, what do you recommend people send?
Well, they have to look specifically at each agent's requirements. Not each agency's, but each agent's. So some people, if you don't follow the guidelines, they delete it right away. So my guidelines, for instance, say I'd like to have the title of your book in the subject line. If you don't put that in, I don't delete it right away. But there are agents who just delete. If you don't follow their guidelines, they don't even open the letter. So it's agent by agent. My own preference is to get the entire manuscript, because then if I am enjoying it and if I do like it, I can keep reading. Some people say, send me 10 pages, then they come back and send me 3 chapters, send me the whole thing. So partial or full is the term of art. But it's agent by agent.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so now we'll open it up to questions. So if you want to put up your hands.
And we're going to use the mic so that it will be recorded. So.
Okay, and here's my question way of doing things. Put up your hands, anyone who wants to ask a question. I will give you a number, and we're going to go in numbers, so that way you don't have to keep your hands up all the time. So 1, 2, polka dot person, 3, nice grommet. Your clasps on your jacket, I love. 1, 2, you're number 3, number 4, sir, number 5. This side doesn't have any questions. Okay, so number 1, let's start with number 1.
Hi, I'm Jamie Estrada. I actually work in publishing at Penn, and I'm the rights administrator. So what I do is pitch rights for translations and translation licensing. And what I've noticed in the course, and we work in academic publishing, so obviously it's very different from children's books and young adult. But what I've noticed is that authors, there seems to be a large divide between what authors know about rights and copyright and, how to protect themselves and what the reality is out there for selling books and for the publishers, bottom line. And I was wondering if you could talk about what kind of work the agent does in educating authors about those issues and how authors without agents or who are looking for agents can do more of that for themselves, because it really does concern me being on the other side, seeing what
most
the gap
academic
is.
authors don't have agents, right?
No, but I kind of serve as the in-house agent.
Right.
For
So
them.
so
Yeah.
you're doing that job. So
Yeah.
so my answer to that is, as an if you're writing for academia, it's a whole different ballgame. I have no expertise on that, and the it's not as remunerative financially, although it does add laurels to your crown.
What she just said is very funny.
There's no money in academics. As an agent, yes, you do talk about, okay, do you want to reserve your translation rights to yourself, and then the agency will sell them at the book fairs in Frankfurt and Bologna, or do you want the publisher to control your rights? There are a lot of things that an agent, yes, does educate or help an author understand about how the work can be exploited in different markets. Okay, Thanks. Number 2 person, polka dots.
Hi, I'm Katie. I have a sort of semantics question, but I don't really know anyone who I can ask. And since you're a literary agent, I thought this might be a good opportunity. I recently got into a discussion with my fiction writing class about actual format of how things are sent, like PDF versus Word doc. Does that make a difference at all? Because the only time I've ever seen someone make a distinction was an agent who told me to send her a Word doc.
Yeah.
But everybody else has been kind of like, oh, just send it in however you want. So
Some agents will say, like my site says, send a Word doc. Some people like PDFs because they read them on the readers more easily. PDFs tend to be take more memories, so some people don't like those. But I wouldn't get too caught up on that. In film writing, formatting is extremely important, and you can only format your work a certain way. But in fiction or nonfiction, you can send a Word doc, and then the agent might, like me, always change it into Times New Roman 11 point, because I don't like to read things that are not in Times New Roman as on my screen. But if you are doing, say, complicated nonfiction, say you're doing a craft book or a cookbook or something with sidebars, you might want to send a PDF, because then it doesn't get all mashed up when it goes by email. Okay, you're welcome. Number 3.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a selfish question. I'm a writer and working on my first novel, and I'm curious about all the adult literary fiction writers who are interested in YA. So my 2 questions are, do people have different agents for different parts of their work? So, for example, I already have an agent for my literary fiction, but could I have another agent for YA? And then what's the difference of the editorial process for those manuscripts?
Okay. So YA means young adult or teen literature. And for you, your question, go to your agent and ask your agent, I'm working on this young adult book. Do you represent young adult books too? If you're happy with your agent. I mean, most agents will dip into teen books. They won't dip into adult agents. They won't dip into picture books, or middle grade is even a little iffy. Middle grade being sort of 5th, 6th, 7th grade. But there's a famous story of Rick Riordan, who wrote the Percy Jackson books that are extremely popular and have sold millions of copies. His agent said, I've done these mysteries with you for a while. I love you. I love your mysteries, but I'm just no good in young adults, so take it away. So another agent who's really great made her fortune on him, but that's fine because she's a great agent. And anyway, so I would ask your agent. And then if your agent says, look, I just hate teen lit, just get out of my face, then you go through the same process looking for a new agent. And say, while my adult literary fiction is handled by X, she and I have agreed, or he and I have agreed, that I would need a person who's more embedded in children's books to represent my teen novel. Does that answer everything? Oh, the editorial process. The editorial process or the acquisition process? Same.
Could I interrupt a moment?
Yes.
Because I would like your response. I feel differently, and I'd like to know what you think. I think that I had a very bad experience. I wanted an agent so bad when I was starting, and I couldn't get anybody interested in my work. Finally, I found an agent, but I found an agent through reading some article that talked about famous agents, and I found this famous agent who said, yes, she'd represent me, and she did adult work, but she was going to represent me on a children's book. And in my book, I had freckles that talked. And it was a sports story, a boy story, a friendship story. It was 5th grade. She said, I can just sell your book in a second. Just dump the freckles. They're the stupidest thing in the world. And I was going to do that. this was the first novel for children that I wrote. I was going to do that. And then my son, who was in 4th grade at the time, said, don't do that. Let's ask my good friend, Lloyd Alexander. My son's class had visited the home of Lloyd Alexander, who he's now dead, but he was a famous children's writer, and he lived in Drexel Hill in the Philadelphia area. And my son had read everything Lloyd had ever written. And he said, we have to ask Lloyd before you do anything, because my son really loved the novel, because he's my son. And so I said, how am I going to ask him? Well, Nick pulled down the phone book and opened it up, and there was his name, and I called him up. And I actually talked to him, and I told him that I really wanted to sell this book. I spoke very, very fast, and I was, I was astonished to have this famous man on the other end of the phone. And when I finished my little blurb, he said to me, "Lady, you're crazy. I can't possibly tell you if talking freckles work in your story without reading your story, so send it to me." He was marvelous, and I sent it to him, and 2 days later, he called me up and said, "Don't drop the freckles, drop your agent." And I sent it to 3 publishing houses, and 2 of them offered to buy it. So my agent, while she was famous, was not the right agent for me. She didn't know children's work. So I don't know. I don't know if my experience was weird or...
No, it wasn't weird, but they're telling things about that story. Telephone book, one thing. And...
Yes, 1990.
Yeah, so it was a long time ago. So nowadays, a lot of adult agents also have expertise in young adult specifically. But yours was not young adult. Yours was younger. Anyway, editorial process. I think actually children's people tend to be quite close to the book editorially. You get long letters. It's very much in the tradition of... a woman who died yesterday, Charlotte Zolotow, who was a great, great editor and came from the Ursula Nordstrom school, and Ursula Nordstrom practically invented children's book in this country, children's books. Anyway, you get these quite hands-on, quite intense editorial sessions with teen editors, I would find. Okay, now we're up to number 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hi, I'm Ben Nathans, and I hesitate to reveal this, but I'm a professor of history here at Penn. I was inspired by the children's book exhibit at the New York Public Library to write a children's book, picture book, and I'm going to warn you in advance, I'm going to hand you a query letter when this is all over. My question is...
I only accept email.
I saw that, on your website.
It's still true.
You're
still
here
true.
in person. How are writers matched with illustrators?
That's a very good question. Picture book writers write texts. A successful picture book text must leave ample room for illustration, for interpretation by illustration. The text is then accepted, we'll skip over a lot, by a publishing company and contracted for by the publishing company. The publishing company's offer is predicated on the idea that there will be a illustrator as part of the deal. It is not your responsibility to find the illustrator, nor is it your responsibility to write notes about what the illustrator should do, unless there's something that says, "Pow!" and we don't know what happened in that frame. So you need to say, the cat jumps off the mantelpiece. Once the text is secured by the publisher, and your royalties will be half of what they would be if you were just writing a novel, because the other half go to the illustrator. Once all that's done, then they'll say, "Oh, I wish this could be done by, Chris von Allsburg, or by this person I just saw on a blog, or by this person we go to a lot." And they offer your manuscript, sometimes with your consultation, sometimes without, depending on what your deal is and who your publishing company is. They then send that to the illustrator, and the illustrator reads it and says, "Oh, I just don't get this. I don't like it, no. Or the illustrator says, oh my God, this could be my next great work, yes. Then providing a deal can be made with that illustrator, then you are teamed up together. Then your work is sent to that illustrator, and you do not get to say, this is how it goes. Instead, the illustrator is as valued a part of this equation as the author is, and the book is as much the illustrator's book as the author's book. And the illustrator needs to come to it with a completely open mind about what he or she can contribute, and then the contribution should be, ideally, greater than the sum of the parts. And however, if this is a nonfiction book about, the American Revolution, and you've done specific research, then the illustrator would probably be happy to hear, here's where you find the Minutemen correct regalia. So that's how it works. Okay, you're welcome. Number 5.
Hi, I'm Emily, and I just had a question about the overlap of all the industries, publishing, literary agents, editors, etc. Like, do they have a lot of overlap, and can you do multiple fields of this work at once? And also, where do you find that your most valuable experience has been in those different fields?
So you mean as a job candidate?
Yeah.
You cannot be both an agent and an editor. No, because they are. They
Conflict of interest.
Well, plus you can't have 2 jobs. I mean, you just can't. And it's mostly conflict of interest. You can be a writer and be most other things. In fact, you pretty much have to be most other things. But you can't be. If you're applying for a job, you could look in all those fields and all the many different avenues of publishing. But you can't do a lot of them simultaneously. So you could say to yourself, okay, I graduated, I have an English degree, I can read and write, how do I get a job? You can try to be an intern, or you can go discover yourself and then come back and say, okay, now I need a job. And you apply, you dress up your resume, make it as attractive as you can. And then you could apply as an editorial assistant, a marketing assistant, a rights assistant, a production assistant, a copy editor. There are lots of jobs in a publishing company. An e-marketing person, a social media marketing person. I spend all my time on Tumblr, so I'm qualified to work in your department. So you can apply for a lot of different jobs within a publishing company. Or you can say, look, I've got a nose for what sells. I love books. I could sell anything. I could sell the chair I'm sitting on. I should be an agent. The thing I want to sell is books. Or you can write, and take any job. Here's somebody who needs copy for a website. I'll do that, and you hone your skills that way. I work in advertising. I do all kinds of things, and suddenly you have a portfolio of writing. So in terms of career, if you really are interested in publishing, there are many avenues into a publishing company, and don't discount them just because you're not working for, Sunny Mehta, who runs Knopf and does literary fiction. That's not probably going to be your first job. Okay, that was it for the questions on this side. Now we have a question. Let's see, any more questions? Put up your hands if you have questions. No one does. You do, right? Okay, here's a question.
Hi. So I was wondering, I've seen some books that fall in a really neat category that are a mix of comics and prose for YA books. Like Cecil Castellucci did a book with Nate Powell called You're the Beast that I thought was really great. And I've heard from the people working on these books that they kind of fall by the wayside sometimes because they don't know, or people working on them, I'm not sure if that means bookstores, agents, or publishers, or editors, they don't really know where to put them. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts about unconventional formats in that way, and kind of
well,
where
you kind of
that
answered
could
your
go.
own question there,
Mm-hmm.
because the big question that any publisher asks himself or herself is, where is this going to go in the bookstore? Is it going to go in? How can it be categorized? Because categorizing is very important for bookstores and for the metadata of your book online. So if you have something that's not fiction, not even classically a graphic novel, but some kind of hybrid of something that's already a little bit marginalized, it's hard. It is difficult. So you have to sort of set your expectations possibly a little bit differently, thinking, okay, first I've got to make an inroad into the marketplace in general, and then they've got to want my book. Or vice versa. First, they got to love my book, then I'll make an inroad into the marketplace. So it's tricky. Usually, the people who publish books that are, as marginalized as those books are, they specialize. Like the First, Second, and kids' books, or like Drawn and Quarterly, or probably other places you're familiar with. And they're great at it, and they have a very specific targeted audience, and they have listservs and they have mailing lists, and but I won't disabuse you of the idea that it is difficult. Okay, we got some more. Here's you are number one, and then who's that other person? Number two. Okay.
Hello, my name's Christy, and I was wondering what you did to break into publishing, your editorial job. What qualifications would you need, or any of that?
Very little. I bought a suit at Macy's, and then I went to an employment agent. This shows you how long ago this was. Found her name in the newspaper, which they had back then, and she said, "Oh, you have front of house appearance. You should be a receptionist." And so she took me around to some places, and they were all could have been decent jobs, but my heart was not in it. Friend of my roommates, where we lived in her parents' house, said, "Oh, you're a publishing type. You should be in publishing. You're a publishing type," for whatever reason. Probably because I used to write editorial comments in my textbooks in college, awkward. I bought a suit. I went on some, she gave me 3 names, and I was too scared to write to them or call them in those days. And then I finally did, and the person said, "Oh, we just filled that position." So I felt like an idiot. So then I called the other 2 people. They said, "Can you type?" In those days was a question. And so I could fast, and I got a job as sort of a fill-in. Then they decided to hire me. I had to take dictation. That was part of my test. I had to take a letter, Miss Bowen. And so I got that job. I was completely at sea. It was at Basic Books, which is still a well-known and well-regarded publishing company that does mostly, almost exclusively, nonfiction, close to academic books. Everybody was a PhD who was an editor. I had nothing. I could barely read the flaps, much less books. They didn't interest me. And then I saw a sign in the bathroom, which is how things were done then, that said, "Reader wanted children's books." And I thought, oh, well, that's what I should do. And in fact, when I walked into Basic Books for my first interview, I walked in and I said, "Oh, this is where I should be working. I mean, this makes sense." Like nothing else had made sense. I walk in there and I just think, "Oh, I get it. This is me." And then the same thing with the children's book thing was like, "Oh, right." Because I wasn't interested in adult fiction. Everybody's like, "Oh my God, you're at Basic. It's part of Harper. You can move into adult fiction." I was like, I don't know. And then there was like children's books, and I thought, "Oh, right, I get it, the scales." And so that was more than 30 years ago. And I'm still at it. So that was a good reaction. Anyway, I had nothing. I was an art, history, and English major, which actually turns out is good for picture books. But who knew at the time? And I like to read. I get along with lots of different kinds of people. That's it. Now, that was a long time ago. There were more jobs. But those are the essentials. Maybe you're a philosophy major, maybe you're a history major, maybe who knows what you are. But do you like to read a lot all the time? Are you a good critical thinker? Can you think on your feet? Are you a recluse? There are jobs for recluses in publishing. You can be a copy editor. they're known reclusives, and they love it that way, and that's what makes them good. Are you peppy? Do you give your name and number out to everyone? Be in publicity. There's lots of different ways of being. Are you a multitasker going crazy? Manage. Are you a to the text person? Be an editor. So there's lots of different ways. Are you design savvy? Be a designer. There's your answer. Now we have, I think, time for, 1.5 more. You were, yeah.
Hi, I'll stand so you can see me because I'm as short as the chair. I'm Susan Martell. You also look for trade books. So I have a two-part. Am I right about that?
Not as much as other people at my agency.
Okay. So that's part of my question. One was, what kinds of books are you looking for that are not children's books? The other part is, if you get a book that isn't right for you, but someone in your agency,
we pass them.
You pass.
Mm-hmm, right.
Okay.
Do you want to explain what a trade book is?
Yes. So a trade book is a book in a bookstore, period. Adult trade is what many people write. They write books for adults. And our agency does mostly adult trade. And so you can go on the site and find out more. What am I looking for? Oddly, I've turned into a publisher, an agent of illustrated books for adults. So I just signed up a book called, this is sort of a book, an illustrator whose name is Cecilia Ruiz, and she has a manuscript for a book called The Book of Gaps, which is about failed connections and holes in one's life. It's illustrated and very little text, but it's for adults. So I have and then I had Goodnight iPad, which was a spoof of a children's book, which sold to adults, which has sold lots and lots of copies, and that has done really well. So people, once you have a success, people gravitate to you with other things. I honestly am not, I have one work of literary fiction for adults that I'm working with right now, taking out to publishers. I'm not a known and trusted name in that arena. So so when that email comes from me, they don't immediately stop what they're doing. In the children's book arena, they may not immediately stop what they're doing, but they will read it, they'll take it seriously, they'll know that it's very targeted to them. I think, honestly, if you're doing adult fiction, you should find someone whose name conjures, yeah.
Not everyone is as forthright.
Well, there we are. There's another question. We have till 1?
Yes.
Okay. We can have maybe 2 more questions, so if you have been too shy. Okay.
This is just, I was thinking about, I love your enthusiasm for, I love this book, and I'm going to sell it. But what if other people don't love it? What if you can't sell it? Like, have you ever run up against this, like, I don't get it. Why aren't they going for this book? And what have you done in those situations, or does that never happen to you?
Well, no, of course it does happen. I mean, some agents are so targeted that they only ever represent exactly what they know they can sell. But when you take on an author, the author will have a wide body of work and will not necessarily always present you something that you think is 1,000,000% saleable, but they'll say, send it. So you do sometimes, sometimes I think, well, I wouldn't buy this book, but, as a publisher, but there are these people who would. So I have clients, actually, who I've been working with they're a team, writing team. I've been working with them for 2 years on selling something, and we finally got an offer. I've been working with another author of adult fiction who does his own illustrations within the fiction. That, too, at least 2 years, and he revised, and finally today we have an auction at the end of the day, so we'll see if we get any bids, but I think we will. So sometimes you never give up, like William Churchill, but sometimes you do. William Churchill? Winston, thank you. I knew that wasn't right. Like Churchill. Winston Churchill. And sometimes you do, like other also smart people, and you say, you know what? It's not. This book is not happening, and I've had that too. And then the author says, "Well, I've got something else." Here's a note. Were there other questions, or should we have the note to end on? Okay, we have one more, but we'll do the note almost to end on, which is, if you are going to be a writer, you have to write a lot of stuff. You cannot just write, here's my book, it's done. This book is it. If you're really going to be a writer, keep them coming, because if that one doesn't sell or if that one goes out and it sinks, then you've got to come back with something else. Okay, we have 2 super quick questions. Lightning round.
This one's very quick. Okay. I work in advertising. I write, but I know a couple of decent illustrators. Is there a situation ever where you would bring a picture book to an agent that already has illustration as well as text?
You could bring a picture book with illustrations. You might say to the agent, we are willing to be considered separately, i.e. if you love the text but don't love the illustration, or vice versa. And yeah, that's the lightning round answer. And then there was one more, I think. One more? Oh, yeah.
I guess, wow, this is loud. I guess my question was, for books that are made in like special formats, like Braille, would they be made into regular books first, and then?
Yeah, there is a clause on just about every contract that says if we make your book into Braille, or a Braille publisher makes your book into a Braille book, nobody gets any money for it. But every book contract says we will try to. If a Braille publisher approaches us, we will try to make that work.
So it's not something that I guess appears in Braille first, or with the intention of being a book in Braille.
I don't have any experience with that. I saw one little hand creep up, or not. Maybe I didn't. Okay.
There is a place called openbook.com. You can go to them if you're writing books for any kind of handicap, and you can talk to them about it, but there is no money involved.
Okay. However, there is money involved in being a successful writer, and I hope you all become successful writers, and we all make a lot of money and a lot of great art together. Thank you for attending.